Most people have been to a zoo, safari park or aquarium at some time. For many, it's just a day out. Others believe zoos are essential to stop animals becoming extinct. But are zoos acceptable anymore? Do they really save endangered species? Or are they simply there for our amusement? Zoos would have us believe that things have changed dramatically over recent years. Animals are no longer in cages, but in naturalistic habitats. Or so they say. But what difference does it make to the inmates? Every species is adapted for its own unique environment and occupies a specialised place in the ecosystem. Climate, social group, diet, these and many more aspects of their lives are crucial to their welfare. So how can these needs be met for such a variety of species in a zoo, especially when they have animals from all around the world, from koalas native to Australian eucalyptus forests to a polar bear from the Arctic?
One of the major behaviours that zoo visitors see is this stereotype pacing. Bears will walk to the end of their enclosure and they'll do a stereotyped head swipe up and walk to the other side and do the same thing like that. And you can actually map the route that they take. There's no challenges at all to enrich their lives.
Big cats like leopards, tigers and lions, they will often show signs of stereotypic behaviour, and what they will do is they will pace around their enclosure. And visitors will often stand there and say, oh look, they're marking their territory. They don't have any territory to mark, they have this tiny, tiny zoo enclosure. And their way of coping with the relentless boredom that they face day on day is to pace. And they will mark out exactly the same routes around their enclosure. They will even use the same paws. And once they've got to the end, they start again and again and again and again. And they will repeat this behaviour for many, many hours. And stereotypic behaviour comes from an animal who has simply become bored in the environment that it's living in.
Elephants, the largest and most powerful of the land mammals, live in complex family groups and can travel as far as 80 kilometres a day. These intelligent and majestic creatures live 3 times longer in the wild than they do in zoos. Lions, the most social of the big cats, reach speeds of up to 58 kilometres per hour when hunting. A study by Oxford University scientists found that 40% of elephants in zoos perform stereotypic behaviours, and lions spend 48% of their time pacing. Space for animals in zoos is obviously limited. Lions and other big cats have 18,000 times less space in zoos than they would in the wild. That figure rises to 1 million times less space for captive polar bears. Sharks often get injuries to their snouts from repeatedly knocking into the tank walls. It's not just a matter of space, but also the quality of the environment. Primates have seen their forest homes exchanged for little more than a playground climbing frame. And this fox is kept in a pit-like enclosure without the ability to dig. Can these enclosures really meet the mental and physical needs of animals for a few days? Let alone years. Indoor enclosures are even more likely to fail the animals' needs. Yet this is where many spend long hours, either overnight or in bad weather. Paintings of the animals' natural habitats on the walls are for the benefit of the human visitors, not the animals.
Zoo inmates live in enclosures with viewing from all sides, so the solitary and the shy will not spend a day away from prying eyes, not even in their indoor quarters. Chimpanzees are our closest living relatives. They make and use tools to acquire foods and have sophisticated hunting strategies. Like so many species, chimps share a wide range of emotions with humans. But whether the animal is a great ape or a snake, what right do we have to cage these animals for our amusement? Birds are stripped of their most precious gift, the ability to fly. Those who can flap their wings a couple of times before reaching the other end of the aviary are the fortunate ones.
Zoos will tell you that, well, the birds can fly across the aviary, but they really can't fly very far. There's lots of animals in zoos, snakes, reptiles, who also have impoverished lives. And people don't understand that even these really need a lot of stimulation.
Reptiles, amphibians and fish are often the forgotten animals, confined to the tiniest of tanks that wouldn't look out of place in the worst of pet shops. They too suffer the same welfare problems that are more obviously recognised in captive mammals. Reptiles climb or scratch at their glass tanks, a behaviour known as interaction with transparent boundaries. Similar behaviour is seen in other animals kept in tanks.
Some zoos even encourage visitors to handle animals, risking the creatures becoming frightened or injured. Such animals are not meant to interact with humans, let alone be handled by them. Conservation is now given as the main justification for zoos. But just what do they do to save endangered species? Actually, 89% of the species kept in UK zoos are not threatened, and a quarter of zoos don't keep any threatened species at all. Around 8,000 species of animals are threatened with extinction. Yet approximately only 20 have been returned to the wild with any degree of success. Where captive breeding programs do exist, most are not designed to release animals back to the wild, but to supply them to other zoos. So what happens to all the animals when very few are reintroduced to the wild? Most are resigned to a life of captivity. The Captive Animals Protection Society estimates that at least 7,500 animals, and possibly as many as 200,000 in European zoos, are surplus at any one time. Some of these are sold into the exotic pet trade, even to circuses. Others are killed, as no zoo will take them, their bodies incinerated or sold to taxidermists. Being born and raised in captivity in the unnatural environment of a zoo, on display to crowds all year round, would make it difficult for animals to survive in the wild. Wildlife rehabilitation centres do their best to minimise human contact with the animals and keep them in conditions as close to the natural habitat as possible. A zoo is not a sanctuary or rehabilitation centre. It is a place where animals are held captive purely for our amusement.
It's my belief that zoos actually harm conservation because they give the false impression that they're actually protecting species, when in actual fact they're diverting attention away from the problems in the wild, prolonging rather than solving problems. Some conservation scientists believe that the existence of a captive population gives a false impression that a species is safe. Although very few animals are ever going to find their way out of zoos alive and back into the wild, there is quite a traffic of animals coming into zoos from the wild. And in actual fact, 70% of the elephants now in European zoos came from the wild. And a study by the Captive Animals Protection Society found that 79% of animals in European aquaria are taken from the wild. To really help animals, we need to protect their habitats, which of course benefits a diverse range of species. Zoos are spending millions of pounds on keeping animals in prison for people to stare at, when for a fraction of the price, natural habitats containing thousands of animals and plants could be protected. The cost involved should be considered as saving entire ecosystems rather than just a single species.
Zoos claim that seeing a live wild animal gives an unparalleled appreciation of nature. But what are they really showing us? Television wildlife programmes have ensured that our understanding of these animals extends beyond these pathetic exhibits. Zoos leave people with a distorted view of nature. Signs on zoo enclosures are often of poor quality, giving little information. A Captive Animals Protection Society study of UK aquariums found that 41% of the animals on display had no signs identifying their species, the most basic of information. If the enclosure has no sign at all, there is little opportunity for education. Studies have shown that most visitors spend less than 3 minutes looking at each exhibit, and sometimes as little as 8 seconds. Parrots may live for 80 years, primates for 30, reptiles for 20. What do they have to look forward to? Day and night, summer and winter. Zoo visitors have the choice to leave, animals do not. And what of safari parks, seen by some as better than traditional zoos? Their drive through nature actually limits the time visitors can spend watching animals.
Zoos often refer to the animals they confine as being ambassadors for their species, almost as if the animals had volunteered to be put in the cages. But what messages does this give out when zoo visitors see such unnatural and disturbing behaviour? This poor gorilla is repeatedly eating his own vomit. He eats, then he vomits, and then he eats again. And this poor chimpanzee sits and eats her own faeces. What a sad, distorted view of nature zoos give us. Perhaps because people only stand at these enclosures for a few minutes, often these images will pass them by. But for those that stay a bit longer, the reality and the desperation of these animals becomes more obvious.
Really, zoos are no more than theme parks. The animal's just another attraction alongside the funfair rides. Some zoos even present animals performing tricks to keep the visitors amused. Circus-style shows have elephants, sea lions and parrots performing tricks. It's time we looked again at our relationships with other animals. Wildlife is all around us, whether we live in a city or in the countryside. From birds in the garden to badgers and deer in the woodland, we can all explore wildlife in its natural habitat.
As if zoos weren't bad enough for the animals they incarcerate, they also pose a potential risk to visitors, particularly in terms of children and people who might have compromised immune systems who can't fight off disease. And they're a threat to the staff. And that threat comes from zoonotic diseases. These are diseases that can pass from animals to humans and cause illness. There's also reverse zoonosis, where diseases can pass from humans back to animals, so that's a risk to the animals in the zoo as well. While zoos now have to encourage visitors to wash their hands after contact with animals, that is hardly possible in safari parks where people are confined to their cars and, at the same time, are actively encouraged to feed animals. And it's not just diseases visitors need to worry about. What protection is there here to stop people being bitten by the inmates? To make matters worse, many dangerous animals, including chimps and wolves, have escaped from their cages and roamed freely before being recaptured or killed.
The future for animals in zoos is down to you. The Captive Animals Protection Society works to end the captivity of animals for entertainment.
The attitude of many visitors would suggest that zoos have got a long way to go before they can claim to teach respect for the animals that we share this planet with.
Somebody has got to keep up the fight. We have got to have the dream that we can do it.
Any venue in which animals are kept for solely human goals is a fair target, if you will, for CAP's campaigns.
We want to see zoos phased out and resources directed to protecting natural habitats for the benefit of all species. Please don't visit zoos. Instead, learn about the wildlife around you, as well as that in other countries.
The world is fascinating. We don't have to put animals in cages to learn about them. What I would say to anyone is, please don't visit zoos. They're of no value. Learn about the wildlife in your own country. Help to conserve it. Put your money and your resources to somewhere valuable. Most people know more about exotic animals than they do about their own wildlife. We've got some beautiful creatures around us that you rarely see. Make the effort to find out what it's all about and protect our environment.
Support real conservation projects that help animals in their natural homes, wherever they may be. We can all do something to help animals. There is no place for zoos in the 21st century.